On the farthest edge of a small mountain town, where winter winds often howled louder than the morning roosters and snow blanketed every rooftop like a thick quilt, there lived an elderly woman named Amina. Her tiny wooden cottage, though old and patched together like an unfinished puzzle, always smelled of warm herbs, lavender tea, and fresh yarn. She was known across the town for her calm smile and for the magic her hands could create on a loom. Some would say the threads she touched held more than fabric, they held stories, warmth, and sometimes, healing. Amina had lived alone for years. Her husband, Rashid, had passed away a decade ago, and their only daughter had moved abroad. Though she missed them deeply, she had found comfort in weaving blankets and shawls for the community. Children would gather around her porch during chilly evenings, watching her fingers glide across strands of wool, creating colors and patterns almost too beautiful to describe. To Amina, weaving wasn't just a craft, it was a language of love. Every winter, she made a special blanket, a masterpiece she poured her heart into. Instead of selling it, she donated it anonymously to someone in need. She never revealed her identity, believing true kindness should be wrapped in humility. This winter, however, was harsher than any the town had seen in years. Snowstorms came without warning, blocking roads, freezing rivers, and trapping many families inside their homes. Prices soared, supplies dwindled, and even those who had always managed well began to struggle. In the center of town, a young mother named Sana lived with her 7-year-old son, Michael. They had moved there only a few months earlier after life in the city became too expensive. Her husband had left without explanation, leaving her with debts, eviction notices, and a heart heavy with disappointment. With nowhere else to go, she settled in the mountain town, hoping to rebuild the pieces of her life. But hope didn't come easily. Sana cleaned houses for meager pay and sometimes worked in the bakery during mornings. Michael tried his best to help her, often going without things other children had, yet never complaining. Their house was small and cold, especially during the brutal winter nights. They had only one old heater that barely worked, and blankets thin enough for summer, not storms. One evening, after a particularly fierce snowfall, the temperature dropped so low that even the windows seemed to shiver. Sana checked their one heater, it flickered weakly before dying completely. Fear gripped her. She wrapped Michael in all the clothing they owned, but the cold seeped through the walls like an unwelcome guest. "Mama," Michael whispered, teeth chattering, "will it be this cold all night?" She pulled him into her arms, wishing her embrace was enough to warm him. "Just hold on, my love. Morning will come." But she wasn't sure. That same night, up on the hill, Amina sat by her dim lantern, finishing the blanket she had been weaving for months. It was unlike any she had made before. Shades of deep blue blended with gold threads, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Silver patterns curled along the edges like dancing frost. Every stitch held a prayer for warmth, love, and hope. Amina didn't know who would receive it this year, all she knew was that someone out there needed it more than she needed sleep. When she finished, she wrapped the blanket gently, placed it in a simple box, and wrote a note in her delicate handwriting. "May this blanket warm more than your body. May it remind you that even in the coldest times, you are not alone." Before dawn broke, she put on her thick coat, stepped out into the biting cold, and slowly made her way down the mountain. Her breath puffed into the frozen air like little ghosts of warmth. She walked carefully, leaning on her cane, her boots crunching through layers of snow. Though old and frail, her determination was strong enough to rival the winter storm itself. By the time she reached the cluster of houses at the edge of the town, her fingers were numb. She searched quietly, observing windows with thin curtains, houses with weak lights, doors that looked untouched by warmth. When she came upon a small home where no smoke rose from the chimney, and where frost clung thick to the windows, she froze, not from cold, but from a knowing feeling deep within her chest. This was the home. She placed the box gently on the doorstep, whispered a silent prayer, and walked away before the sun rose. Inside the house, Sana had barely slept. Michael lay curled in her arms, their breaths fogging the air. Each hour felt longer than the last. When dawn finally broke, a faint knock echoed from the door, or perhaps it was the wind, she thought. But something made her rise to check. When she opened the door, she gasped. A white box sat nestled against the snow, untouched and clean, as though placed by a gentle hand only moments earlier. Confused yet curious, she brought it inside. "Mama, what is that?" Michael asked, rubbing his sleepy eyes. I don't know, she murmured, lifting the lid. Inside lay the most beautiful blanket she had ever seen. It shimmered under the weak morning light, the colors rich and alive. Her hands trembled as she touched it. It was warm, so unbelievably warm, like holding a sunrise. And then she found the note. Sanaa read it once, twice, and her eyes filled with tears that warmed her cheeks. Someone is kind, Mama, Michael whispered softly, wrapping a corner of the blanket around himself. Really kind. Yes, she breathed shakily. Someone still believes in kindness. They wrapped themselves in the new blanket and immediately felt relief. For the first time in days, warmth spread through the room, settling around them like a soft embrace. Michael leaned his head against her, slipping into peaceful sleep. Sanaa watched him, tears of gratitude streaming silently. Throughout the day, news spread across town about the harsh storm. Some families lost electricity, others struggled with heating. Volunteers came out to distribute food, and neighbors shared firewood. Kindness, it seemed, had become contagious. Sanaa carried the blanket with her everywhere inside the house, using it at night, during meals, and even while working on paperwork. It felt like a constant reminder that they were seen, cared for, and not forgotten by the world. Weeks passed, and though winter remained merciless, things slowly improved. Sanaa found more stable work, and a kind neighbor offered to repair her heater. She began to save money, even if only a little at a time. Michael made friends at school and often talked about how warm their magic blanket was. But something tugged at Sanaa's heart, a desire to thank the one who had given them that gift. She asked around the town, but no one knew anything. Some said it was an organization distributing supplies, others believed it was the work of a local charity. But a few whispered rumors about an elderly woman who lived near the mountains, weaving warmth into the cold. One late afternoon, when the sun cast a gentle pink over the snow, Sanaa wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, held Michael's hand, and walked toward the hillside. It was a long walk, and the path was slippery, but she felt a pull guiding her. At the top, she spotted a small cottage, smoke curling from its chimney. Heart thudding, she knocked gently. The door opened slowly, revealing Amina, who looked at them with mild surprise. Assalamu alaikum, she greeted, her voice warm but frail. Wa alaikum assalam, Sanaa replied softly. I hope this isn't strange, but did you make a blanket recently? One like this. She held up the corner of the shimmering fabric. Amina smiled gently. Not wide, not grand, but the kind of smile that felt like home. I make many blankets, she said simply. Some find their way to those who need them. Sanaa swallowed, moved beyond words. Tears pooled again, but this time they did not fall from sadness, they came from an overflowing gratitude she could hardly contain. You saved us, she whispered. You saved my son. You saved me. I don't know how to thank you. Amina shook her head lightly. No, my dear. I only gave what my hands could make. The rest, the strength, the courage, that was already inside you. Michael stepped forward shyly. Thank you, he said, hugging the blanket close. It felt like the sun was hugging me. Amina chuckled softly and knelt, despite her aching knees. Then I am grateful it reached the right home. Sanaa stayed for tea, sharing pieces of her story. Amina listened with patience, offering gentle words of comfort rather than pity. Their conversation flowed like they had known each other for years. Before leaving, Sanaa asked if she could visit again. You will always be welcome, Amina said. From that day on, they visited often. Sometimes Sanaa helped gather firewood, other days Michael listened to Amina's stories of her past, learning about her husband and the daughter she missed dearly. In return, they brought fresh bread, vegetables, or simply companionship. Spring eventually arrived, melting the snow and washing the mountains in green. The town recovered from the long winter, people planted gardens, repaired roofs, and reopened markets. Life, like the seasons, renewed itself. But something in the town changed permanently. People began to check on one another more frequently. Neighbors who barely spoke before now shared warm meals. Children helped the elderly carry groceries. Acts of kindness spread quietly, creating an invisible blanket that wrapped around the community. And at the very center of that blanket were an elderly weaver, a young mother, and a bright-hearted child, bound together not by blood, but by hope. Years passed, but the blanket Amina made remained with Sanaa and Michael. Even as Michael grew older, even when they moved to a better home, it stayed folded at the end of their bed, a reminder of the winter that almost broke them, and the kindness that held them together. And whenever someone in town slept cold, whenever a family struggled through a hard season, people would say, "Perhaps another blanket woven with hope will find its way to them." For kindness, once shared, never truly ends. It continues, like a thread, passing from one heart to another, weaving lives together in ways no one can ever measure.